Hi there. So in this lesson, we're going to continue learning CSS. And during this lesson, we're going to learn the CSS property position. The position property allows us to control the position of an element in relation to another one. So arm yourself with a bit of patience because soon you're going to understand what I mean and how it all works in practice. The position property can possess the following values: static, absolute, relative, and fixed. So let's discuss all these values one at a time. We're going to start with position static. First, we create divs with classes A, B, and C. And then for each div, we set the width and height at 100 pixels. And then for class A, we're going to write background color orange. And as you can see, the first div is orange and the size is 100 by 100. Then in the same way for class B, we're going to write background color, but now the value is green. And now we've got another div, a green one. And for class C, we also write background color with the value blue. And as you can see, now we also have a blue div. So please note that position static works by default. So even if we don't write position static, all the elements will behave the following way. They're going to be placed one under the other from top to bottom. So as you can see, our blocks are indeed placed one below the other. That is, if you also add several blocks or paragraphs, they're going to always be one below the other, that is from top to bottom. So this is how position static works. And by the way, if you ever hear the phrase normal flow, you should just know that this is the same as position static. Okay, so good. We've discussed what position static, otherwise known as normal flow, is. So now it's time to learn about position absolute. And now let's write position absolute for class B, and let's see what happens. Do you see what happens? The blue block moved up and to the location of the green block. So it's behind the green block and appears invisible to us. For blocks with position absolute, you can use the property left. And if we write left 70 pixels for position absolute, we are setting how many pixels the block should be moved from the left edge. So let's consider another example. To do this, we need to add top 40 pixels. Top works similar to left, but it specifies by how many pixels a block should be moved. Not from the left edge, but from the top one. And how will the green block behave in this situation? Yes, it's going to be moved upwards and take the following position. Exactly 70 pixels from the left edge and 40 pixels from the top edge. So let me emphasize this again. The values top and left set how many pixels an element with position absolute will be moved from the left or top edges. Okay, so we got that cleared. Now let's discuss position relative. To do this, let's go back to the original version of the code. And again, our three blocks are placed one beneath the other. So now let's write position relative for class B. And also, let's also add left 70 pixels. Do you see what happens? Our green block moved from the left by 70 pixels, so it moved to the right. But please note that in this example, the block moved by 70 pixels not from the edge of the screen, but from its original position, as if it had set its original position, which is shown by the simulated dashed line, to make it easier for you to understand. And then it moved by 70 pixels from this position. In addition, please note that the blue block didn't move up and didn't take the place of the green block. Why is that? Well, because if we set position relative, then even when a block is moved, it still occupies its old space. That's why the block didn't move up. And let's consider another example. To do this, we're going to add top 40 pixels. So how will the green block behave this time? Right, it's going to be moved down. And why is that? Well, again, because it moves relative to its original position by 70 pixels from the left and by 40 pixels from the top of its initial position. So this is unlike when we use position absolute and it moved from the edge of the screen. So you need to remember that when using position relative, the values left and top cause the block to be moved from its original position. And also, the block leaves the space behind. So just to solidify the knowledge we just obtained, Let's again compare how these two values work, position absolute and position relative. Okay, so when using position absolute, the block moves relative to the browser window. And when the block moves, it doesn't leave the space behind. That's why the block moves up to take the green block's old location. And when using position relative, the block moves relative to its original position. And when it moves, it leaves the space behind, so the blue block cannot take the green block's old location. Okay, good. We got that cleared up. Now let's talk about position fixed. And we're going to start by going back to the original code. And let's specify position fixed for block B. And first, we're going to see that the block behaves similar to when we used position absolute. In other words, the other blocks act as if they can't see the green block. And that's why the blue one took the green one's space. And right now, the blue block is behind the green one. And also, if we specify left 70 pixels and top 40 pixels for the green block, it's going to be placed exactly as it was when we used position absolute. It's going to be moved by 70 pixels from the left screen edge and by 40 pixels from the top. But we're going to see a big difference as soon as we start to scroll the page. As you can see, when we scroll the page, the green block's position is fixed relative to the browser window. So no matter how much we scroll, it's always going to be at 70 pixels from the left edge of the browser and 40 pixels from the top edge of the browser. Usually, position fixed is used for menus so that they would always be on the top side of the screen. So for example, we can go to the website globaladidas.com and we'll be able to see the same type of behavior that was just mentioned. The top menu is fixed to the top part of the screen, so that means it used top 0 and left 0. And the last thing that we're going to talk about today is the interaction between blocks with position relative and position absolute. So let's say in HTML we have a block with class A and a block with class B, which is inside of block A. Well, block A is orange, block B is green, and let's set position relative for block A, and let's add left 70 pixels and top 40 pixels. So what's going to happen? Right, because we set position relative, our block, including all its content, that is including block B, is going to be moved from its original position by 70 pixels to the right and by 40 pixels to the bottom. So this comes as no surprise. Now let's specify the following for block B. Position absolute, left 70 pixels, and top 40 pixels. So what's going to happen now? Well, in this case, our block B is going to be moved by 70 to the right and by 40 to the bottom. But now it's going to be moved from the edge of block B, while in the previous case, it was moved from the edge of the browser window. Now, why is that so? Well, because we specified position relative for block A, and block A is an ancestor for block B. This is a distinctive feature of how blocks with position relative and position absolute interact with each other. That is, if absolute is inside of relative. So remember, if we set position absolute for a block and move it using left and top, this block will look for the closest parent block with position relative. If there is such a block, it will use this block as the edge from which to move. And if it fails to find a parent block that has position relative, it will move from the edge of the browser window. But position fixed always moves from the edge of the browser window. Okay, so as usual, now let's move on to the practice part. Let's create 3 blocks in HTML. First one with class A, the second one with class B, and the third one with class C. We're going to set the width 100 pixels and height 100 pixels. It's going to be for all of the blocks. And then for block A, we're going to add background color, let's say red. And then for block B, background color green. And then for block C, we can create background color blue. So let's see what we have on our page so far. here we have the red, green, and blue blocks. And by default, all these blocks have position static. So if I add position static for all these blocks, nothing's going to change because it already has it. So let's set position absolute for block B, and we're going to see what happens. As you can see, the blue block is hidden behind the green one because it can't see the green block. And now we can move this block anywhere, for example, by 400 pixels to the right and by, let's say, 300 pixels to the bottom. And here's our green block. And now it is positioned relative to the browser window because it lies directly in the body and doesn't have any block with position relative. So now let's wrap our block B into another div with class wrapper. And for our wrapper, we set position relative. Let's also add border 1 pixel solid. And for example, the color black. So as you can see here, here is our wrapper and our block is positioned relative to the wrapper. But the small wrapper is too small to be able to see a big difference. So let's specify the following for the wrapper. We're going to have width 300 pixels. Height also 300 pixels. And here for block B, we're going to specify left 50 pixels and top 50 pixels. And here, as you can see, here the 50 pixels and right here also 50. So now our block is positioned relative to the edge of the wrapper. And if we now move our wrapper somewhere to the right by writing left 200 pixels, then block B, the green one that is, will also be moved along with the wrapper. And now our green block, block B, is completely independent of the browser window. Now let's discuss the third position option, position fixed. Let's write position fixed for block C. And then we're going to add, for example, top 50 and left 50. Also, let's add some content. So we have a scroll bar. Let's copy this and paste it multiple times. Just like that. And we're going to refresh the page. And as you can see, now we have a scroll bar and our blue block is positioned relative to the browser window. 50 pixels here and another 50 right here. And now if I start to scroll the page, we see that our block remains fixed while our green block remains positioned relative to its parent block, that is relative to the wrapper. And the blue one is always positioned relative to the browser window, no matter where we place it. So what do I mean by that? Well, if I, for example, place the blue block inside of the wrapper, doesn't matter, nothing's going to change. It's still going to be fixed relative to the browser window. So this is how the position property and its values static, relative, absolute, and fixed work. So that's it for this video, and we'll see you in the following lesson.